Thank you everyone so much for coming. This session is called Cinematic Journalism, and we're going to be talking largely about how filmmakers can work within the print media, filmmakers who are working within the print media, what the situation is, what it's going to be. We're going to try and tackle that. I don't know if we will, but we'll give it a go. I'm just going to briefly introduce everyone, and then they're going to introduce themselves and also show you a clip of what they've been working on. To my far right is Tom Happold, who is Head of Multimedia for Guardian News and Media. Just to my right is Inigo Gilmore, who is an award-winning photographer, writer, filmmaker, won the RTS award for his Haiti coverage this year, which is incredible. To my left is David Dunkley-Guimard, I said that right? Just about. Who is an international award-winning video journalist and also artist-in-residence at South Bank. And then we have Dan Fung Dennis, whose film is playing in the festival, Hell and Back Again. He's also a photojournalist and creator of Condition 1, which you will see a clip from in a minute. So I'm going to pass you over to Tom.
Oh, God. Hello.
So if you want to say a bit about what you do, and then you can watch the clips, okay?
Okay, yes. Hello, everyone. I'm very conscious that I'm the sort of middle management person on this desk, beside exciting filmmakers. Though I wondered if I should announce at the beginning that I have a £200 million commissioning budget and try and fill up the room very quickly, but I don't know if that work or not. Basically, I run the Guardian's audio and video department, and like a lot of newspapers, obviously we're now see the future and the present very much digital online, and have therefore moved into audio and video. I'm just going to say a tiny little bit about why we've done that, and then I'm going to show a short little show-really type thing which raises some of the things about what we are doing and why. And basically we've moved into video because we can, because it's exciting, because it helps us do our journalism better, because as a media organisation online it makes us money. You know, our adverts on video sell for much more money than our adverts on tech stories. And finally, because it allows us, you know, which is the top of this little film, to show things and hear things that if you're writing about musicians, you want to hear and see the musicians. If you're writing about an iPad app, you want to see and feel that iPad app. So those are the sort of things that I'm going to show you now. If this works, hopefully it will.
See you driving around town with the girl I love, and I'm like, fuck you. Just the change in my pocket wasn't enough. I'm like, fuck you and fuck her too.
The Wasteland. The burial of the dead. April is the cruelest month. Breeding lilacs out of the dead land. Mixing memory and desire.
The idea of making an app of the Wasteland came about a year ago, last Easter, and we came up with 3 ideas on the spot. One was to do the solar system, which is now released and has gone on to win awards and do very well. And the other of which, totally different, was the Wasteland.
We're tied up. So, yeah.
Say hi to the Guardian.
Thank you.
Say hi to the Guardian. When you said we can see 2012 from our house, is that your house? Is that your house? 2012. Is that going to be you?
Oh, that's a good question. Nobody else has got that. No, we can see 2012 from our house.
We're going to Trafalgar Square, where we're going to see more uni students. Follow me. Let's go! We say fuck that! Fuck that! Fuck that!
I think they should all get jobs, so they won't have to worry about cuts in grants, wouldn't they?
They need to fucking increase here, mate. The same right, £30. What do you think life's a joke?
30 grand! 30 grand on a uni fees! Fuck off, man!
Where do you think we're gonna get money like that from? You can't even get jobs, yeah, let alone fucking go into uni. What's going on?
I know you're angry, but they will use this as an excuse to put the riot police in.
Fight the police! Fight the police! Shut the fucking right, but fight the police!
Peaceful protest! Peaceful protest! Oh my God!
We have to make a statement. If we don't make a big statement and it doesn't go around the world, we're not really going to make our voice. We're not going to show our voice. We're showing that we don't. We're not having it. 9 grand. We're not having it. That's it. This is London students talking. We're not having it.
We're not having it, fam.
Why she needs to get on, man? What the fuck?
He has also the slightly efficient power. There was him talking to a camera. It was in the distance. We weren't anywhere near him, so this was all like with a telescope. And that was really irritating. Actually, you couldn't sort of hear or hear what he was saying. He was talking to somebody down the line through a camera, and going on about some sort of big society guff. And then he came up.
You can put a fish in the condom now.
My camera ran out of film, unfortunately. What he said to me, actually, I didn't hear because I was so dozy, so completely knackered. Oh, you're going to put a fish in a condom? So, well, that's a good suggestion. I can't turn that one down. So he was knackered, I was knackered, everybody's knackered. The whole thing's totally fucking absurd.
Where on Earth or in space is this otherworldly monument? Sometimes, just sometimes, architecture makes you want to burst out into song. Well, I'm not going to do that because the building behind me does all the singing you'll ever want. It's the new Guangzhou Opera House by Zaha Hadid, and it's one of the most remarkable buildings, not just in China, but in the whole world. This extraordinary new building has been a very big event in China. Zaha Hadid, its British architect, had hoped to have built an opera house like this years ago in Cardiff Bay in Wales. An unholy chorus of dim local politics and cultural philistinism wrecked her plans.
You forget Europe, you forget Tunisia, you forget Libya, you forget everything, and you think about how I will die. This is the important question, let's say. When you watch left, right, up, down, you see only blue sky and blue water. It was being many strong wave, and the boss, it's full of water, and we ask the driver, he tell us, if the weather will stay like this, we will be fine. If the weather has become more windy, I would say, well, I'm so sorry for you. When you see yourself so little in this vast, let's say, sea, we think about many, many things. Why push yourself in this dangerous adventure? It's not adventure, it's more. For this, I have to say thanks God, trillion times. But we are fine now. We are fine, but I not must forget this moment.
I'll be really brief, so people can ask questions and other people can talk. That was about 8 hours long, I realised watching it again. But, fundamentally, the way we've ended up working being a video department for a predominantly text-based organisation that is largely still a newspaper online has been driven by the opportunities we have, which are to do with new technology, smaller, cheaper cameras, the ability to have very skilled photographers move into video. They are dependent on the media world in which we live and work in, So what our sort of, competitors are doing and what we can do in comparison, and also the constraints within which we work in our own organisation. Very quickly to go through those things. Very quick.
It's not me.
At the top of the film, you saw various things that were shot on very small mobile cameras. The first thing was an interview with Sarah Palin, which was done by one of our print reporters, a guy called Ed Pilkington. Now, it's not well shot. It was just on an eye touch, but it is sort of vibrant and interesting. The second one was... Is it me? Is it driving everyone mad? The second is obviously Tsunami, which everybody has seen, but that has just changed the way that news and documentaries come across. That all this footage is now coming in. And that's illustrated perhaps best in terms of our organisation by the footage that I think a fund manager filmed in the city that came first to The Guardian of Ian Tomlinson being knocked down by a police officer. In terms of, there's been loads of talk over the years about citizen journalism and all these things, but actually where that really is making a difference is the spread of video cameras across the general public and what's then coming into news organisations and documentary makers and filmmakers. So that's affected what we've done. I'm not really going to talk about the sort of changes in photographers because Dan Fung, I'm sure, will do that much better than us, but, the ability for the Canon now to do video allows an organisation like ours to work with our photographers who bring a different aesthetic to their work, which means you get something interesting and exciting. Occasionally that process can be enormously frustrating, but it also means it's something interesting. I showed the bit from the student protest because often we're faced as a department in working in news events which are happening at that moment. You have a website which, through text has the ability to be updated utterly constantly, and you work in an environment where broadcasters have the ability to update stuff constantly. So what do we then do to deal with that situation? And actually, in many ways, we're sort of back to the future in a way, is we actually produce things that are much more traditional forms of documentary and try and grab people's attention. So that film was filmed in the day, edited overnight, and presented a film about the whole day in its entirety, rather than picking out what the news did, which is often the more violent and news-making moments. So, arguably how well we do it, but we are trying to think of what we can do that is different and unique, and often those are about things that are more in the tradition of, filmmaking. Similarly to differentiate ourselves from news, we can be more, and TV, we can be more opinionated in our filmmaking. Steve Bell's a good example of that, the stuff he did in the general election, and the stuff that the Guardian columnist John Harris did in the general election is a good example of that. And related to that is the circumstances we work. Most of our video producers, shoot and edit. Sometimes they work with, the more traditional reporters in the organisation, but the reporters then have to file a story, so they're not in the edit suite. So we have actually developed a style of shooting and cutting video that we allow the subjects of those video to speak a lot more, and we're not trying to squeeze them into a very short news package, and we don't, cover that package with its entire, VO. So we use much less of that. And that also, I think, relates to the fact that most of our video also sits in a website with a series of articles. So we're not in a situation where we're forced to include every bit of context in a film. So that does give us freedom. So we often focus on the human story rather than, how many immigrants crossed from North Africa to Italy, all those sort of details. We have a bit of that in the film, but, the film is part of a package which may have more details, more historical background, things like that. That's all I'm going to say for now.
I'll pass over to Inigo, but I'm going to ask you a question first. You work with, whenever you go, you covered Egypt, you covered Libya recently, and Haiti. When you go out to these places, are you working for a number of organisations at once to kind of cover the trip as a whole? And if so, how do these, working with people like The Guardian and stuff, how does that work into the process?
Sometimes I'm, just to be clear, I'm a one-man band, so I shoot all my own material. Sometimes for current affairs type features or longer documentaries. Just did a 1-hour documentary which went out at the end of last year on Channel 4, a film from Haiti. Sometimes I just jump on a plane and head off and hope for the best. That's what I did with Haiti. Literally, I saw the earthquake had happened, and I got on a plane and with my camera and took it from there. And I did work for a few different people out in Haiti, including Channel 4 News, and then I stayed on and did various features. More recently, I did a piece for PBS Frontline in Egypt during the revolution. I did another piece in Libya for another American channel. So it can vary. Sometimes I'm commissioned beforehand, and sometimes I just go on a wing and a prayer, really. The piece I'm going to show today was actually for Guardian Films, and that's one reason we selected it. I can't quite remember what. Oh, it's about problems Palestinians have in Gaza of getting medical treatment, and sometimes they end up dying because they can't get out because of the closure there. If I remember rightly, I think I was already going to Gaza, and then I got on the phone to Guardian Films and said, do you want to take a film from me? And so I shot it and then came back to London and edited it in London. So it can really vary, and there's no rhyme or reason. You sometimes get commissioned beforehand, sometimes you get commissioned later, and sometimes things morph from one thing to another. Because in Haiti, I started a news story for Channel 4 News about this baby, and then it evolved into a 1-hour film over a long period of time, going back and forth and spending a long period in Haiti. So, all bets are off, really. Maybe we should show the clip. And I'm going to sort of abruptly stop it somewhere because it's quite long. There's no particular stopping point for this.
Erez, the only passenger crossing that remains open between Gaza and Israel. For many critically ill Palestinians, this crossing is a tenuous lifeline. It's a passage to essential medical treatment in Israel. With Gaza blockaded, only a fortunate few are now able to get through here. Each day, several families turn up, hoping to collect their special travel permits. Permits that often mean the difference between life and death. The Israelis are sensitive about who and what is filmed here. These patients are desperate. According to the Israeli Organization Physicians for Human Rights, patients from Gaza are increasingly asked to make an impossible choice: to become collaborators with Israeli intelligence or to remain in Gaza without medical treatment. Majed al-Mughalawi is crossing with his young daughter, who needs urgent treatment. He explains that a previous permit to get her to an Israeli hospital took 6 months to secure. For this family, at least, there's a ray of hope. Not so for 27-year-old Khitam Fouad al-Bashar. She's suffering from a life-threatening anemic condition. She had received permission to be transferred to an Israeli hospital, but that was before the interrogation.
وأنا ضليت نستنى أكثر من 3 ساعات. آخر شيء لما عبرت قعدت 3 ساعات هناك ساعتين في التحقيق. قعدوا يسألون عن الشباب وعن المقاومة وعن النهضة. حكيت لهم ما بعرفش حاجة، وأنا لي 8 سنين بعاني يعني بتابع في المستشفى، و9 شهور كنت في المستشفى يعني ما أطلعش بالمرة. وكانت لما بعثوا بعد التحقيق كانت حرارتي 40 وكنت تعبانة وكان دمي 3 يعني ما كنتش أقدر أمشي. وقعدت هناك ساعتين عندهم في التحقيق ويسألوني أسئلة وأنا مش عارفين أنا بحاجة بالمرة. أعطوني القلم والورق وورقة وحكى أعطينا معلومات عن الفلان هذا وبنعبرك على إيرز عطونا بدل ما ترجع يعني على غزة. حلفت له قلت له والله ما بعرف حاجة ولا إشي. رفضت. اللي هو مسك الورق قال أنت بتشتغل مع حماس، ومسك الورق وقال لي ارجع على غزة.
I asked Khitam about her prospects of receiving the treatment she urgently needs. In Gaza, informers are used to gather information for Israel to help target militant leaders, including those from Hamas. This man, Saeed Sayam, the Hamas number 3, was killed in a targeted operation during the war in January, which likely involved local Palestinian informers. Several of Gaza's hospitals have been badly damaged, and its medical services are in tatters. So Palestinians who are seriously ill have little choice but to seek treatment outside, Israel being the best option. Palestinians accuse Israel of playing a grim game with the lives of their sick. Those who dare to collaborate with Israel risk being killed, but to refuse may also mean a death sentence. One man who knows this only too well is Saeed Abu Shamala, who lost his brother Khaled last year.
أخوي خالد شاب في 38 من عمره عانى من مرض انسداد في الكبد اتصل بيه على جواله وقال له عايزك بكره فقال له ليش أنا تعبان فقال له اللي بده الحياة بيجي مش بدك تتعالج فراح له ثاني يوم خالد وبعزيمة وبإصرار رفض وهو يعرف أن رفضه سيكون إما إن لم يفتح المعبر فسيكون الموت ما كانش أمامه أي خيار آخر إما أن يتعاون أو أن يموت فضل الموت ليس هناك أي خيار آخر.
Wael's tiny baby boy Rajab was recently born.
Okay, before we move on to David, I'm going to ask you one more thing. I think there are a few filmmakers who don't kind of realise that when you go out to situations, you can be covering for lots of different places. Do you find that the organisations you work with ever want, complete exclusivity of your reporting for a situation, or say Guardian Films are happy with you doing PBS current Channel 4? Is that a realistic way to make a living out of doing these trips?
Well, I try to tend to retain the rights to my material. That's very important, and it's actually interesting because there's been some discussions just in the last couple of weeks over a possible commission. Some outlets, some of the strands, for example, the BBC, tend to want to retain all the rights to the film, and you get nothing out of it at the end, and that's problematic for me. First of all, in terms of just the integrity of your own work, it also means that you can't benefit from it afterwards. So that is an issue, and that sometimes affects my decision whether I go with a certain commission or not. And with Channel 4, I do pieces for them, feature pieces for the news, but then I retain all the rights to that material. And that's very important for me personally, because sometimes I might work on a piece and then it will develop into a longer feature or a documentary. So, yeah, I do try to retain rights, but it depends on the broadcast outlet whether they will allow that or not.
Thank you. I'm going to move over to David, who does a million different things. So if you could kind of summarise what you're doing now.
Okay. Well, first, I just want to say Inigo's stuff. Please do look at it online. I mean, I remember a film he shot of a Palestinian boy who they were trying to rush to a hospital, and eventually he dies, and rushing in and out of taxis. An extraordinary film. I'm a lecturer. I have to say this, so that and obviously, damn fun. You've got to watch it. I'm a senior lecturer at the University of Westminster. I need to say that because they paid for me to come here, so I get into huge trouble. My background's now as a senior lecturer, it's sort of skewed, but I started very early, like these gentlemen here, around 87 after a degree in maths and chemistry, and it didn't quite work out, and then got involved in the sort of working as a radio journalist, BBC, etc. So I was in South Africa in the early 90s, in sort of townships working away, and then Channel 4 as a freelance journalist, etc., producing in-house around the mid-90s. And then towards the latter end, there was an outfit called Channel 1 TV. I don't know whether anyone remembers that. It was Associated Newspapers' attempt to do TV, and they hired 25 video journalists and said, go off and make it. And we did that for a while. Many of them are quite famous now, Chris Hollins on BBC TV and the rest. But where I am now is I don't particularly make stories per se, though I'll show you something. I try to investigate the art of story making, so I'm very interested in, say, the way Dan Fang works with a camera, in the way that Inigo works, the way that other people work to find different narratives. And this is what I invariably sort of end up teaching our sort of students. In conjunction with that then, over the last kind of 8 years, I've had an interesting time working with people like the FT, Chicago Tribune, It's the South Africans, the BBC networks, just trying to get them to understand the different narratives that they can use, particularly online, where I sort of say there is no fundamentally embedded narrative. It's Leotard gone kind of on acid. You know, you can do what you want. And that really sort of sums it up. In the last 3-4 years, it's been more interesting because of my association with the South Bank Centre. So as an artist in residence, once again, it's about investigating narratives. I'll show my little clips that I've got here and then give it backstory. But I think to answer the question why, if I was sitting in the audience, cinema journalism, what does it mean? I asked, a Monocle magazine, anyone know Monocle? Yeah, good. The producer, I've sort of got to know the producer and had sort of tea with her, blah, 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 and I asked her this question about, you know, if someone is a video journalist, how do they get their work out there now? If they can't get it through the networks, you know, people like Inigo have huge track records, so it's probably easier. But if you're not of that kind of nature, how do you do it? And they're quite interesting because they're not doing it now, but they're certainly moving into a space which perhaps will set a trend in the future where you will get outfits, and the Guardian's doing it now, but you'll get magazines who, once you understand their brand and how the way they do things, you will be able to do things for them. And she actually said, you know, we're not doing it now, but certainly you will be sort of at some point in the future looking at this very seriously. I think they're also an interesting case because as a magazine and being offline, more recently, they've done something with Bloomberg. So they've taken their brand, and Bloomberg has sort of put their brand on TV. So I think it's though the outlets within TV, etc., might be limited, I think the proliferation of the likes of these newspapers and magazines means it's really good news for people who understand this medium and can shoot well and tell a story really well. And I think that's the sort of the bent that I would try to get over. I've got 2 snippets which I put into trailers. I couldn't show the actual film because I'm still trying to clear the music. But one's called Tahir Memento. I've been training the Egyptian state TV, yes. The young people who are joining, been in there for the last 3 years, which has been a real joy. Stories I can tell you are, but training to do video journalism, so about just after Tahir sort of kicked off, sort of 3-4 weeks later, a couple of people I trained who were video journalists, an outfit invited me down. I had only 5-6 hours in Tahir, and I managed to grab a couple of people and put together a piece, which for me is what I would do at the South Bank. It's very much kind of Fellini, people dreaming, and then dream sequences. The other clip as well, so it's quite short, it's about 3-4 minutes in total, looks at the birth of video journalism by the regional newspapers in 2005. The Press Association essentially went around all the regional newspapers and said, you now need to do video. And as a result of that, I got involved with them. And it's interesting because some of the things they say, and Dan Fang will reflect on this in much more detail, but this was newspaper people trying to understand video, and you get a little bit of sense of that. And I always remember it was the photographers who always had difficulty going, I don't want to touch the camera, I don't want this one. So 2008, when the stills camera, DSLR, right here, went off, it was like, okay, now I can do it properly. So that's quite an interesting junction in that space. So I've got 2 clips, so if I just show them very quickly, and then I'll allow this good gentleman on my left who want to hear more.
The stories you pick, it shows with how much passion and time you're putting into it.
I've been placed on the street, got heavy feet to carry. I don't know what it means to be quite so complete.
In the morning, I left my house. No one really knew where I was going, except my best friend who's in England, actually.
I'm so tired of walking on thorns and concrete.
My subconscious basically was denying that this is really happening. Something wasn't clicking. You know, at that point when you just assume that this might be either a very vivid dream, or something is going to happen. Something is going to happen, like a picture would snap and you just wake up.
About this painting, it's called For a Better Future for Yusuf,
and Ahmed, Muhammad, Hussein, and others. I think it's very nice because I think about my daughter.
Listen to me.
I think I can do something. I think now God wants to use my talent to change, even if it's something small, to change people, to change people's hearts and the way they think. And that now I have a reason for being born in this country.
Everyone in my family respects me now. So I had something in my mind and I was right. So I feel proud.
Restricted access granted.
This is it. The beginning.
I do not believe that Keith was the victim of a random attack.
By the time we got there, we've been built up for 2 weeks. God, this is really it now. You've got to put together everything you've learned.
About 8 days really on the trot trying to put this video journalism to practice. This is where it's crunch time.
It's the biggest shake-up to television, a revolution in visual storytelling, and at the helm, a new generation of journalists, video journalists, and now newspapers are having a go.
I wasn't perhaps putting it together in terms of print, I was seeing it as a movie.
Do you want to tell people, we just had the demonstration of Condition 1, and we're going to show the trailer, but if you want to introduce what you've been doing.
Sure. I'll give a little background just about myself, and then I'll talk a little bit about what is cinematic journalism and where are things going. I worked as a stills photojournalist, mostly for the New York Times and Newsweek in Iraq and Afghanistan since 2006. And I felt that even though my image was being published widely, they weren't really having much impact. The same images of the war were being repeated, and you could almost expect if there was going to be a story about the war, what image it would be. And there was an advance in technology about 2 years ago where it allowed still cameras to start shooting video. And that allowed me to move into this new medium with the same tool. And all of a sudden, this small camera could shoot incredibly high quality video. And so the tools that were only available to large studios in Hollywood all of a sudden were available to individual photojournalists. And so realizing that, I started to shoot, but it was this transition that I had to make from working with the still image into the moving image. And that's where Hell and Back Again, a film that's playing here this weekend, evolved from. Trying to bring people closer to these experiences in Afghanistan. And I could apply everything I'd learned from photojournalism of simply being an observer, letting events unfold in front of the lens, and using the power of the image to speak to these news events. And so while I was accredited with the New York Times and covering a major operation in 2009, it was a top news story, but I was covering it as a photojournalist shooting video. There wasn't really a place for that. And I think it was Dan Chung with The Guardian who kind of coined the term cinematic journalism. And he was also, like me, a stills photographer that had just started shooting video, and we were kind of grappling of what is this? And we were trying to borrow as well from the narrative from films, but didn't want the visual look that documentaries usually had. You instantly knew when you're watching a documentary that, oh, this is documentary. It's that grainy look. And so with this new tool, this Canon 5D Mark II, we could apply our visual aesthetics from stills into video. And for a long time, none of the video I shot was usable. I would shoot these long sequences of a still image and things happening, and I had to understand of how you actually have to shoot different components to assemble a scene. And I did come back with a huge amount of footage, wasn't really sure where to go with it. It was actually here in Sheffield that I met my producers, Mike and Martin, who helped me craft a 90-minute film from that. And even though that I can have much more context and give a much better understanding of what it's like to go to war and what it's like to come home from it, I felt it was still something that you could sort of feel as distance, further away. And I'm exploring new trends in technology to even close that emotional gap even further, bring people even closer to these scenes. So I'll show a clip to talk about sort of where I'm going with my work. And if I'm not sure if it's the right one, but let's try it.
I mean, I'm talking putting my life now on front line, but I don't care. You know, give me my freedom or give me my death.
So we'll stop there and have the guys hook up the iPad, and I'll speak a little bit further while they're doing that. And so I went from photojournalism into what we're calling cinematic journalism, applying narrative from film with the power of the still image together. And now I'm trying to bring in another element from a completely different medium, one where it brings in the interactivity of almost something like gaming, which allows you to place someone even closer to a situation. So I've designed a new camera system that can capture the entire human field of view. We can see about 100, we can actually see 210 degrees. And this camera captures this extremely wide space, and it creates an image that is really distorted, this circular image that doesn't make much sense. But we found that when we project this circular image onto a dome, imagine a sphere cut in half, then that distortion melts away and you're left with the original scene that you've captured. And when you're standing in front of one of these domes, and we've built sort of this 8-foot dome, when you stand in front of it, your entire vision is filled by this scene. And because of the curved nature of it, you can't really tell what the depth is, and you really feel like you're actually stepping inside this other place. And so it's working from the original ideas of photojournalism of trying to connect people to these stories and bring people closer to something that these ideas. And so with this technology, it's just trying to even get closer to that. So we've recreated that dome with software using for the iPad, where we can emulate that curved surface, and using the gyroscopes and accelerometers in the device, you can use the device as a window to look inside this dome. So I'll step up and just demo it. So this takes a little while to actually grasp, but I'm going to be moving this device, and what you're seeing on the screen is what this device is seeing. And so it's going to be delayed, but you'll see on this screen that when I move to the right, the entire image moves to the right. And so we're stepping outside of the traditional frame and allowing people to actually look around in a space as a film is playing. So I'll just start this.
I mean, I'm talking, putting my life now on front line, but I don't care. You know, give me my freedom or give me my death. They are just asking to be free, to be human, to have dignity, to live like any other people, not under this fucking dictator.
Okay, I think we're going to pause for a minute. If anyone has any questions now, before we move on, raise your hands. Do you have any questions so far? Yeah. Have we got a microphone?
Dan, it's a question for Dan Funk. The technology is extraordinary, what you're doing there, and we had a brief chat earlier, and he touched on this. But watching that clip there, that's now got music on it and is more constructed as a sequence. What's the position? What's the sort of relationship going to be, or how do you sort of guard against it becoming? That's very, very experiential, and it could easily be a fantastic recruitment tool for the Ministry of Defence, or it's like, you know, really feel war as it is, which is what Call of Duty or those games kind of can appeal to. Is there a line somewhere between journalism and a sort of artistic experience of war and actually a bit of just a kick of being there? Because it could easily go in any number of different directions, if not all of them. So I don't know how you feel about that, because it could go in a number of different directions, really, at this stage.
Yeah, that's something that I think about a lot, is how do you frame the context for this? And something like that, it's a little eye-popping trailer with music. But we do really want to frame this as serious journalism, as serious storytelling. And because we aren't combining mediums that have never been combined before, where you have photography with filmmaking, with experiential gaming, there's going to be all these questions raised of, well, what is this? Is this something that can be used to tell a very powerful experiential story, or can it be used as entertainment? And so it's something that we've been carefully weighing, that we want to make sure that what we're doing is used to convey emotion from stories that need to be heard. And so it is something that we want to make sure that this isn't just a tech gizmo, that really at the core of this is strong storytelling and being able to convey scenes and stories and emotions that we haven't been able to do otherwise. And so it's trying to borrow from these different mediums, blend them to create something new, but keep the ethics of it very closely aligned to what traditional journalism has always been.
Do we have any other questions? Yeah, we've got one over.
Yeah, I also found that quite amazing. I was just wondering, what are you calling it? What's your working title for the technology? And also, how is it that you might have said this and I missed it, but how would someone sitting in the audience be doing this or experiencing it? Or is it not an audience thing?
Sure. The company is called Condition One. It's a media technology company. And I'm calling this immersive journalism. It's sort of the next step. I think we've been hearing photojournalism, video journalism, cinematic journalism, and it's rapidly accelerating the pace of change and the type of mediums that we have. And so immersive journalism does what good journalism should always do, bring someone into a story. And so we see this as a new type of video, a new type of content for next generation devices. So it's primarily for tablets, first the iPad followed by Android tablets. And so this will be a free app that you can download. And then the filmmakers will, I could actually demo that else. The filmmakers will be on sort of the first screen. And they're these hybrid filmmaker journalists, photographers. And you'll be able to click on them, meet them, start hearing about their backgrounds and who they are, because it's actually a very subjective experience. You want to know whose eyes you're actually about to step into. And you'll be able to buy their films from within the app. And so we're trying to also disrupt the business model of how journalism is actually usually functions, because it's in disarray. And we see this explosion in tablet devices. There's going to be 220 million of them in just a couple of years. And so we want to create highly emotional, visceral, experiential stories that push this medium and really pioneer a new visual language.
Okay, I think following on from what you were saying about the business model, I'm going to throw this to David and to Inigo, especially to Inigo, because you've been extremely good at adapting to the change in the industry in terms of getting your work out there and commissioned and everything. Do you have this kind of process now? Because obviously a lot of the stories that you cover need immediate coverage. They need to go out there, but you also work on long-term stuff as well. Do you have this kind of step-by-step of, right, this is this bit I do for this, and then I do the longer bit? And when you're shooting, is that conscious in your mind of, I'm going to do this for an outlet, say that like Guardian Films, and this will be part of the long, when you're actually filmmaking, how does that work?
I think, it depends really, coming back to the commissioning thing, because if you're commissioned to do something, you're commissioned for a certain piece sometimes. But most of the time I operate and I film stuff following stories, and what Dan Fung was talking about is the narrative and the strong narratives and following powerful stories, emotional stories, and just sort of getting to the nitty-gritty of those places and those people. And I think then those stories stand on their own, if you see what I mean. And they can be a shorter feature, or sometimes it can develop into a longer film with a natural arc to it. Obviously, with this is all new to me, so I'm sort of kind of blown away by it, really. But yeah, as over time, I've adapted using different cameras, from tape, obviously now to cards, and I started shooting recently with the 5D Mark II as well, as Dan Fung shot his film with. And I think we do need to adapt, and I think in a way is a logical progression towards this kind of thing. My only concern over that kind of image and using that would be, with this ability to move around the image, are you going to lose the power perhaps of the storytelling of those people telling their stories, because it's then harder perhaps to focus on what they're saying to the viewer? That would be my only immediate sort of thought about that. But of course, there's wonderful possibilities with this as well, and I think it's very exciting. And I think you will probably see many videos of journalists, hybrid photographers developing along these lines, I'm sure.
Sorry, I was going to say, firstly, cinematic journalism itself is kind of highly problematic in its definition, and it's something that, and this is not, it's something that the sort of cinema verite, direct cinema crowd face themselves, which is one reason why they were shunted out of TV, and principally because cinema wants to affect you. And the whole idea of TV news per se, which was enshrined sort of 30s, is to be impartial, objective. So you have to be neutral in the way that you position, or try and be neutral in the way, although objectivity doesn't exist, we know, you have to be neutral in the way you position the camera and try and tell the story. So in many ways, I think where Dan Fung is in fact going is not, for me, so much the sort of cinema already exists and it's come back kind of full circle, but it's the idea of the new narratives that you're going to apply. Because if you went and you asked some of the old guard from the sort of, again, I was chatting to Bob Drew about sort of 5 months ago. I shall apologise. I'm doing a PhD in this area, so anyone who's doing video, Jameson, please, I'd love to talk to you. And they will say to you, the guys will say to you that nothing's changed. Absolutely nothing's changed. And so actually, what you're really looking for now is you're looking for kind of meta-narratives, new narratives that go beyond the structure of what you were saying about documentary. And when you have new appliances, they force you to do that. I was looking at something, doing some stuff that Apple picked up on called video hyperlinking. So in other words, if I tell a story and you're going along and you find something that's interesting, when you click, a bit like the DVD extra, you go into that story, and if you want to, you can come back to the final narrative again. Now, if you're going to do that, it forces you to think in such a way as to, oh, I'm doing a story, there's someone in here I want to film, but you're now reacting, so when I finish, I will film you as well. So it introduces all sorts of things. I think the interesting thing, therefore, becomes, as I say, it's not so much the kind of device anymore. It becomes the way we start to think. Now, I'm not blowing my steam here, please. These things have already been addressed, and I'm not going to go philosophical, but if you look at people like Lyotard, if you look at people like it's sort of the 70s from, Deleuze, etc., they talk about extending the narrative. They talk about the fact that there's already cinema in our head. We understand when there's great cinema. It exists. It's the collocation of good pictures, composition, sound, movement, all that sort of stuff. I think where we're going now, which when we move into it, it's going to be more exciting. And I think there's a thing called Gamer. Do you remember that film Gamer, where the guy's actually in a room where he's controlling someone? I was speaking to a chap who used to be very senior in Sky News, and he said to me, he's just seen demoed the idea of 3D news. Now, what does that mean? If we're sitting here, there were 2 or 3 cameras that you'll have in your living room, and it will project a live size of Usain Bolt about to do the 100 meters, and you're sitting there looking at him. Now, to wrap this up, essentially where we are then, which I think is incredibly interesting also, so you have Dan Fung pushing the edge that way online, and the TV's been doing this for years. They did it with film. TV did sort of 4:3, film said, we've got to go 16:9. So you've got Dan Fung pushing this edge that way. You've got TV boards at the back thinking, God, what do we do? Let's do 3D. And then you're going to have Dan Fung, someone else pushing the edge. To wrap it all up in a sort of way that makes sense, and going back to the original thing I said about almost things not being new, Gombrich was the one that's coined the phrase that everything we do is schema plus correction. So we do one thing, and then we add a little bit on top of it, and it changes. And then you do another thing, someone else comes along, and they add another bit. And then for that time, so if you look back on what they did in the 50s when they made these cameras work, that was it. All of a sudden, they were it. And then someone said, well, let's change the lens from it being a follow-through lens to a prime lens. And then that was it. And then ENG came along, and that did something to it. And then, so, these, for me, this is like the kinescope of the sort of 2010. And that will extend the range as other people now sit back and think, oh my God. But I'm excited by it. I think it's incredible. And I think it will, when it comes on stream properly and people get it, I think it will force a different way of making the news. And at the point where someone cracks how the video hyperlinking works, so if I do pan off that way and I like the fact that that doctor's doing something and I can click on, I then follow the doctor's story. I think that will introduce a temporalness, a different temporalness to the way we sort of read and watch news.
Thank you. Wow. Tom, I'm going to throw you the difficult question now. We're going to have a lot of filmmakers in the room who might want to get involved in video journalism. How difficult is it to approach, say, Guardian Films and Guardian Multimedia if they have a good idea? Are you taking filmmakers on? How do you find people?
We find people very simple. Yeah, but we had always, when the department was created, we had an advantage because part of the department was already established television production company in Guardian Films, so we did have a big advantage, and we had relationships already, and people knew people like Indigo. But anybody can approach us, email me or whoever with any ideas. The difficulty is, and the harsh reality is, sorry, I'm going to put a downer on the occasion, but is that we do not have an equivalent budget to, say, Channel 4 or Sky. That is the reality. we are growing, and hopefully we will. And as TV and the internet merge and new devices come up, there are greater and greater opportunities, and hopefully we'll have more budget to spend. And I also think there are related to that opportunities to different ways of paying people. We're looking at revenue share in terms of the advertising on videos and things like that. So those are sort of things we are looking at exploring, which is sort of related to what Dan Fung is doing. Is actually sort of saying, why has it got to go through a broadcaster? So people can approach us. It won't make you rich, though. We have. I did buy you a drink last night, though. But though, in many ways, actually, we are a remarkably quick organisation to get a yay or nay from. I guess Channel 4 News and Newsnight are pretty quick, but it's not like the commissioning process that a traditional channel would have. So yes, we do commission stuff.
We have a few minutes for more questions, if anyone has any. Yeah. Oh, we've got two down the front, if you've got a microphone. Here.
Hi, thanks. It's a question for Tom. I noticed that, I've seen quite a lot of really impressive films on your website recently. I know there was one about female genital mutilation that looked to have been made in conjunction with Christian Aid, I think. I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about how other people end up help. I presume they put some funding in. It was a very substantial piece of work by the looks of things. I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you partner with other organisations to provide funding.
Well, we partner in various ways. In that way, we did a series of films in partnership with Christian Aid, of which Christian Aid paid for those films. We retained, the actual film on female genital mutilation we decided to make before they come to us to do stuff with us. We were going to make that already. But we went through a process. We're very, very clear that we retain final editorial say with them over those films and the final cut and all those sort of things. And we also make great effort to, there's this sort of transparency that we're doing in partnership with somebody else, but they paid for those films and we made them. And those sort of things, that is a, that's something we are exploring because we don't have enormous budgets and we just want to do good journalism. There's a host of issues about doing stuff for NGOs and charities, but we increasingly work in a world where, in many ways, the big charities like Oxfam or whatever are now in a world where, in many ways, they are, since they've become increasingly campaigning groups as well as groups on the ground, they actually have larger news gathering operations than many media companies now in terms of people on the ground, press officers. Actually, they have filmmakers working in those organisations, things like that. So, that is something we explore. But there are lots of crunchy questions that you have to deal with in those relationships. So we do stuff like that, and we do stuff with partnership with them.
Thank you. Oh, bloody hell. Okay, but surely at the heart of good journalism is a very good story, and obviously the strength of journalism lies in the democracy of information. Now, as everybody's kind of scrambling around to find either the new ways of thinking or, as we might want to call it, new business models, doesn't this kind of sometimes smack of an elitism? And who are you actually reaching? Who are you actually wanting to speak to? And this is a question for, I suppose, everyone on the panel with regards to their work. It's all right having an iPhone or an iPad application, but that's not really going to be reaching the people you really want to tell the story to, surely.
Yeah, that's a good point. Right now, there is not that many iPads out there, or iPhones. There are quite a few iPhones. But we're seeing in developing countries, they're entirely skipping the internet and going to mobile devices. The move from online to mobile is one of the largest digital revolutions that we're seeing. And when you ask mobile users in developing countries, do you use the internet on your phones? They'll say, no, no, no. Do you use Facebook? Yeah, of course. And we're seeing this connection to the internet through mobile devices in a way it's absolutely huge. And it's only a matter of time before smartphones move into developing countries as well. And so there's going to be, at the time being, content that's being generated for a limited number of tablet devices and smartphones. But that is going to become the predominant form of mass communication. So it's all about telling stories to the widest possible audience. And right now, there's a way to generate revenue through this system that Apple's created and that Google's created with Android. And it's limited for the time being, but there is a viable business model behind it, and it will grow to something that this is something that we can foresee as the mobile devices being the primary way we communicate.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It is about democratizing, and I brought today a range of cameras here that do the same job. Flip, A1, this, High 8, Super 8, and my DSLR down there. We did a huge project, United States of Africa, where we went to Ghana. We took 8 journalists who'd never been out of the country. We took them to South Africa. We locked them in the bedroom for 4 weeks. Said, you can't watch television. Now go to Soweto and all the townships and go and report what you see in reference to what you understand, not to what the other media you see on the media are telling you. And it worked perfectly well, those references. So long as they can get the equipment, they use the internet, they use any device they want. I can see a debate that says if the iPad might be out of reach. I don't have an iPad. But, you know, this stuff, there's a guy called Ruud Elmerdorp, who's a Dutch journalist who does a lot of stuff in East Africa. And he works extensively with the sort of flip camera and with kids out there. The World Service, I know, is doing a lot of work as well. So I think once you kind of target the group and you know them and you have the right, you know, these were now £70. If there's any benefactors inside here, people who sort of have money, Guardian Films, buy a couple of hundred, yeah, you know, we can take them over and train people. I'd do it for free.
I think just 2 points to make. You know, for an organisation like The Guardian, you know, we're committed to remaining free on the internet. You know, the internet, though, you know, the move to digital's challenged our ability to make money as an organisation that's kind of print. It's rather scary for our business model. You know, it has created a massive opportunity for us, you know, whereas being, you know, number 6 or whatever in the broadsheet market in the UK, read by public sector professionals in London and large cities with liberal universities, you know, we are now across the world. You know, you go places and people have heard of The Guardian and are looking at and watching our stuff on the web, you know, so we are getting out there. And, you know, we are part of other organisations coming from different parts of the world. You know, we're not the only people on the web. You know, going on the web, you have an opportunity to look at non-traditional, you know, broadcasters and media organisations. So, you know, we're very committed to that. You know, I think in terms of democracy, it's also worth making a point about technology. You know, the stuff that Dan Fung is doing is enormously exciting and innovative and brilliant, but also, but it does involve enormously skilled and talented filmmakers making it. You know, the technology can be taken the other way and actually allow, you know, people to be involved in filmmaking and telling stories about their own lives. You know, in the clips I showed, the gentleman from North Africa who travelled across the Mediterranean to Italy, you know, we're going to return to him because we've given him a camera and he's been filming his journey. He's now in France. You know, last week we put up on the site a project we did with the Israeli human rights charity, B'Tselem, which was 6 video diaries, I guess, by people living in the east of Jerusalem about their lives there. Now, you know, obviously we edit that. There is a sort of sense of, you know, but that is giving people a voice that they wouldn't have had 20 years ago or 10 years ago. So I think, you know, there are issues. Of course, any digital thing, you know, selling something on a tablet or things like that, but I think there's also enormous opportunities to go with it, which are about giving people opportunities to speak and communicate, and similarly the influence of social media.
I think that's a great point to finish on. Dan Fung's kindly said that people can actually try out Condition 1 on the iPad for a few minutes afterwards, so feel free to do so. I want to say huge thanks to Tom, Inigo, David and Dan Fung, and thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Charlotte.